Is there going to be peace in Ukraine? Is China's peace initiative genuine? And how the world's reacted to it. The ongoing military confrontation between Russia and Ukraine has assumed an increasingly more dangerous nature with the announcement of President Vladimir Putin's policy of partial mobilization in September 2022. He also threatened to use lethal weapons and everything in Russia's arsenal to defend the motherland. The Chinese 12-point policy paper was released on Friday. This comes as the world marks the first anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And what does this imply for the conflict's future? Keep up with the most recent happenings by listening to our coverage. In their statement, China's foreign ministry called on Russia and Ukraine to avoid attacking civilians. It said both parties should strictly abide by international humanitarian law and avoid civilian casualties. Earlier, during the United Nations security vote, Beijing said sending weapons to Moscow and Ukraine would not end this war. However, China abstained from voting in the UN votes, so it was not forced to vote against Russia. Dai Bing, Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, stated the top priority was facilitating a ceasefire without delay. He said the longer the brutality, the more severe the human suffering. The United States said China was considering providing arms to Russia just days ago. However, Beijing rejected the statement and said that such comments from the United States are merely speculation. We will not provide weapons to Russia. This will clear its position as a neutral party in a war while maintaining close relationships with its strategic ally Russia. Now, Beijing has presented their anticipated peace proposal just hours after abstaining from the United Nations resolution to end the Russian war against Ukraine, calling both countries to agree on a ceasefire and hold peace talks immediately. As we all know, China did not condemn Russia and did not cast a vote against them. Now, this is widely seen as a position of pro-Russian neutrality. Although expectations were low, the outcome of this was somewhat disappointing. Analysts immediately responded that it was essentially the recycling of the Chinese position on all of these issues. It is certainly not a plan and doesn't do anything to advance peace. Ukrainians were consulted. Therefore, some analysts were looking for some exciting twists, new angles, or something different from what we expected from China's previous position. Most people call it pro-Russian neutrality, but the neutrality element is becoming weaker and weaker. It later emerged that Western intelligence are suggesting that Beijing plans to supply lethal weapons to Russia, detailing that Chinese officials are considering lethal supplies, semiconductors, and spare parts for use in Russian weapons. Most of us can understand the context in which a significant concern is providing material support for Russia. The problem is that this will only get worse in the weeks ahead. It has become increasingly difficult to maintain the position of neutrality, whatever the political and diplomatic language they use. As a result, some analysts have called this peace deal biased mediation. China declared its intention to serve as a mediator and provided a 12-point plan to halt hostilities. The idea comes in response to a recent declaration that it is attempting to serve as a mediator in the conflict. This has reignited Western alliances seen as adversaries by Beijing and Moscow. A ceasefire, a peace negotiation, and a lifting of Western sanctions against Russia are all part of China's proposal. The relevant nations are urged to avoid misusing unilateral sanctions and do their share in de-escalating the Ukraine situation, according to the statement. It states that all nations' sovereignty should be respected, although it is unclear how this would apply to Ukraine and its lost territory since Russia seized Crimea in 2014. The plan criticizes the United States and NATO, the U.S.-European military alliance, for having a Cold War mentality. The suggestion states that the security of an area should not be attained by building or enlarging armed blocs. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, requested a guarantee that Ukraine wouldn't join the Union before the invasion. There is also the possibility of a ceasefire, peace negotiations, the protection of prisoners of war, a halt to attacks on civilians. China has since reaffirmed that pledge, despite Western criticism. According to U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Beijing is trying to have it both ways. Publicly, they present themselves as a country seeking peace in Ukraine, but we've already seen in recent months the provision of non-lethal assistance that directly aids Russia's war effort. China has primarily supported Russia in political and rhetorical terms. There is no evidence of Beijing providing Russia with arms, but the US has claimed that Beijing is already doing so and may do more. Since the invasion, Russian and Chinese forces have conducted joint exercises, most recently with the South African Navy in a shipping lane off the coast of South Africa. Beijing criticized the expansion of economic sanctions against Russia, saying they were unlikely to solve the Ukraine crisis, as history has repeatedly proven that sanctions cannot solve problems. Sanctions will only harm people and impact the financial systems of the global economy. Russia describes its actions in Ukraine as a special operation, not intended to occupy territory, but to destroy its neighbors' military capabilities and capture dangerous nationalists. Hua Chunying, a spokeswoman for China's foreign ministry, since 2011 said the United States has imposed sanctions on Russia more than 100 times. Still, we can all think about it calmly. Have US sanctions solved the problem? China was highly critical, warning against actions that could have far-reaching consequences. Russia politely rejected China's peace plan and stated that there were no conditions for peace at the moment. Kremlin spokesman Peskov said any effort to create a plan that will aid in shifting the conflict to a peaceful course deserves attention. We pay close attention to the plans of our Chinese friends. In response to a question about the plan's details, Peskov said it should be thoroughly analyzed considering the interests of the various sides, further noting, "This is a very intense process." Kyiv officials have cautiously welcomed the peace deal to end the invasion, but only if it results in withdrawing occupying troops from all occupied territory. They said, "We want to believe Beijing is interested in a fair peace. That means not supplying weapons to Russia." They also said, "We are doing our part to prevent that from happening. Now, this is the top priority from our side." Zelensky stated that he was open to considering aspects of the peace deal. He stated that he intended to meet with President Xi Jinping and that the meeting would be beneficial to both countries and global security. Most people, especially the Western leadership, believe this deal only favors Russia. If it is a neutral deal, Beijing should talk to both sides. Why do meetings involve only one side and ignore the other? Western leaders have primarily dismissed the peace plan, claiming that Beijing lacks international credibility to serve as a mediator in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. U.S. Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that my first reaction was that the war could stop at one point, to respect all states' sovereignty. This war could end tomorrow if Russia stopped occupying Ukraine and withdrew its forces and troops. Ukraine wasn't attacking Russia, NATO wasn't attacking, and the USA wasn't attacking. Putin launched a war by his choice and wanted to wipe Ukraine off the map and absorb it into Russia. China's policy toward Russia and Ukraine can be characterized as pro-Russia neutrality. On the one hand, it claims not to provide Russia with military or material assistance, but it does not criticize its strategic ally. They have shown a willingness to support this non-aligned principle in their desire for global leadership. Their foreign policy tries to be informed whilst they balance their interests between opposing U.S. principles and trading with Russia. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has triggered a global humanitarian crisis and increased risk exposures in international capital flows, trade, and commodity markets. The global economy is expected to slow further in the coming year. This is primarily because of the massive and historic energy shock caused by Russia's aggression against Ukraine. This continues to fuel inflationary pressures, eroding confidence and household purchasing power and raising risks globally. When will Russia realize that very few wars end in the total and utter defeat of one set against the other? Putin is trying to target the innocent civilian population. The strategy has been used in many wars and has consistently failed. We appreciate you watching our video on the controversy surrounding the Chinese peace deal. It's critical to keep up with the newest developments in the crisis in Ukraine and their possible effects on the surrounding area and the rest of the world. What do you think about this peace deal? How might this impact the current crisis? Please share your opinions in the comment section below. If you enjoyed our video and want to be up to date on it and other international news, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. This will enable you to see more interesting content like this. Until our next report, see you later.